Pain has always been the price of transformation. Sometimes it arrives not in storms but in silences, in glances across crowded rooms, or a moment that rewrites everything. That night, Julia Myers stepped unknowingly into such a moment. She slept with the CEO. He didn't know. She was a virgin and pregnant. The brisk October winds swept through the center of downtown Boston, sending scattered leaves tumbling across the granite steps of the prestigious Avery Grand Hotel. Julia pulled her gray cardigan tighter around her shoulders. She was glad she'd chosen comfort over style for the evening's digital publishing and storytelling symposium. Inside her leather tote, her neatly typed notes felt like an anchor, a familiar shield in a world much larger than her usual quiet workroom at the university archives. "You can do this," she whispered the words under her breath, a mantra shaped over years of quiet encouragement. The hotel's vast lobby opened before her, filled with polished professionals effortlessly engaging in conversation. Their confident voices created a background hum of ambition that made her pulse quicken with a mix of anticipation and nerves. The symposium hall hummed with low chatter as Julia found a seat near the middle, close enough for a clear view, but far enough to avoid the spotlight. Just as she settled in, her phone buzzed with a message from her mom. "Don't stay out too late. The library opens early tomorrow." At 25, Julia still wrestled to carve space between herself and her loving but cautious family. The lights dimmed and a hush fell over the audience. Sebastian Cole stepped onto the stage. Instantly, the room leaned into his presence. Julia had seen his face in industry magazines and digital culture blogs, but none of them captured the sheer magnetism he held in person. His charcoal suit fit flawlessly, gray, and his piercing blue eyes seemed to meet each person's gaze directly. "Technology isn't replacing stories," he began, his voice unexpectedly warm. "It's redefining how we protect and pass them on." Those words struck deep. They echoed everything Julia cherished about her role as an archivist. During his talk, Sebastian masterfully wove tech trends and narrative preservation into a compelling vision. Julia found herself leaning in, absorbed. Her pen moved rapidly across her notebook, ideas lighting sparks in her mind. It wasn't just about databases or digitization. It was about giving every story, from every voice, a place to belong. When the Q&A opened, her hand went up before doubt could stop her. Sebastian's eyes found hers, and for a moment the rest of the room disappeared. She began, her voice steadier than expected. "In smaller communities, limited funding often holds back tech progress. How would you suggest we bridge the divide between traditional archival work and digital transformation?" A subtle smile formed on Sebastian's lips, a spark of genuine interest brightening his expression. "Excellent question, and one that strikes at the core of our mission," he replied, stepping slightly closer to her side of the room. "What's your current role in the archival system?" he asked. "I'm an archivist at the South Boston Historical Center," Julia responded, resisting the urge to shrink from the collective gaze in the room. "Then you probably know better than most what challenges we're really up against," he said. He launched into a thoughtful explanation about scalable tools and community-driven strategies. But Julia wasn't focused on the words. She was watching the way his hands moved as he spoke. The conviction in his voice, the intensity of his attention, was disarming. After the session, attendees flowed toward the hotel's refined cocktail lounge. Julia stood by a tall pane of glass, gazing out at the city's skyline glittering against the deepening twilight. She was just about to head out when a voice from behind caught her off guard. "South Boston. That's where I first got into Steinbeck." Sebastian was there, 2 glasses of wine in hand. "Care to keep the conversation going about tech and access?" he asked. Julia accepted the glass. Their fingers touched for a fraction of a second, sparking a strange flutter in her chest. "You grew up in Boston?" "Until I turned 12. That library was everything to me back then." He motioned to a quiet corner with plush armchairs. "Shall we?" What began as a dialogue on data and equity evolved into hours of personal reflection. Sebastian shared vivid memories of his younger years spent exploring dusty archives, while Julia spoke of her hope to modernize public access without erasing the charm of analog preservation. They bonded over shared favorites, literary classics and obscure sci-fi novellas, and traded opinions on different storytelling media. Most people assume I'm just about going all digital, Sebastian admitted, loosening his tie a bit. But there's something irreplaceable about the feel of a real book. The texture of the pages, that paper scent. Julia added, surprised by her own openness. It's like you're holding someone else's memories in your hands. Sebastian's eyes locked with hers. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them. The sharp edges of the business mogul's persona softened, revealing a man who understood the quiet power of imagination just as deeply as she did. The evening continued to unfold around them. They found themselves wandering through the hotel's rooftop garden, Boston's city lights shimmering below like grounded constellations. The crisp autumn air carried a hint of something new, something possible. Their conversation moved easily, brushing on dreams, fears, and private hopes neither of them usually voiced aloud. "Do you ever feel like you're performing?" Sebastian asked suddenly, leaning back against the iron railing. "Like everyone around you expects you to play a version of yourself you never really chose?" Julia thought of her mother's overbearing messages, her colleagues' gentle nudges to be more outgoing. "Every day," she admitted. "But tonight, it feels different." He turned to face her, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. "Tonight feels real," he said softly, reaching out to tuck a strand of her hair behind her ear. The tenderness of his touch sent a rush through her skin. What came next felt both unexpected and inevitable, like a perfect twist in a story she'd never dared to write. His kiss was gentle at first, almost hesitant. When she responded, it deepened, dissolving the barriers she had always kept up. Her fears, her routines, that small voice always urging her to play it safe. They ended up in his suite, where desire and connection met in a quiet storm. Sebastian's hands were both assured and gentle, and for the first time, Julia felt truly seen, wanted in a way that rewrote every previous experience. In those hours, she discovered reserves of bravery and joy she hadn't known she carried. As dawn began to paint the sky in muted golds and blues, they lay together in silence. Sebastian's fingers traced small circles on her shoulder. "You're extraordinary, Julia Myers," he whispered. "You see the world in a way that makes me want to be better." She fell asleep believing it, believing that something in her life had finally opened. But when she woke a few hours later, the suite was silent. Empty. No note, no message, no trace, just the soft, lingering scent of his cologne and the memory of words shared in the dark. Julia gathered her clothes with quiet resolve, her mind racing to explain the absence. Someone like Sebastian Cole wouldn't just vanish, would he? She walked home in the pale morning light, her phone silent in her coat pocket. The same wind that had felt so alive the night before, now stung with distance. She told herself it was just a moment, something to tuck away as experience, a chapter she'd move past. But 3 weeks later, staring down at the pregnancy test in the tiny bathroom of her apartment, Julia understood. Not every night is meant to be left behind. Some nights change everything. Some nights change everything, whether you're ready or not. "Everything's fine, totally fine," Julia muttered, pacing the narrow length of her tiny Boston apartment for what had to be the 100th time that morning. 3 pregnancy tests lay in a row on the bathroom counter, each one confirming the same life-altering truth. For the past 9 days, she had moved through her work at the archive on autopilot, while her thoughts spiraled in every direction. The morning nausea had started 2 days ago. An unwelcome companion, though it gave her an excuse to retreat into her private workspace tucked away from the main reading room. Her coworkers had chalked up her pale complexion to a fall virus. They offered sympathy and herbal tea. If only they knew. She returned to the bathroom and stared at the tests again. Just months ago, she'd stopped thinking this was even possible. At 22, a routine checkup had led to a minor ovarian procedure. Nothing dangerous, but the doctors had gently warned her that conceiving might be difficult in the future. Not impossible, they'd said, but unlikely. And now, this. Against all logic, against what she'd accepted as truth. It wasn't just a pregnancy, it was a miracle, terrifying and precious all at once. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Another message from her mother. "Dinner on Sunday? Haven't seen you in a while." Julia stared at the screen. The idea of facing her mom, who could read her like a novel, made her stomach churn harder than the sickness. Marian Myers had a sixth sense for secrets, and Julia wasn't ready to give this one up yet. Sorry, not feeling well. Maybe next week, she typed quickly, before collapsing onto her worn leather sofa, the only nice thing she'd ever bought for herself. It reminded her of the cozy nooks in the archive, and right now, that comfort was all she could cling to. Outside, autumn rain tapped steadily against her windows, echoing the storm inside her mind. On the coffee table, the latest issue of Business Vision taunted her. Sebastian Cole's face beamed from the glossy cover, a headline beneath his photo heralding him as the architect of the next great leap in digital storytelling. Julia pulled her laptop closer. Her hands shook as she typed his name into the search bar. Article after article popped up. Sebastian at tech summits, Sebastian at charity galas, Sebastian in board meetings. In every image, he was composed, commanding, and detached. The same magnetic presence from that night, but now something behind his eyes seemed colder, distant. She reached for her phone again and dialed. Mr. Cole's office. How may I direct your call? A crisp voice answered. Julia's throat tightened. I need to speak with Sebastian Cole. She hesitated, then pushed forward. It's a personal matter, from the Boston Digital Publishing Symposium. I'm afraid Mr. Cole is unavailable, the receptionist replied politely. Would you like to leave a message? Julia closed her eyes, trying to steady herself. Yes, please tell him Julia Myers called. It's urgent. The pause stretched forever. 1 moment. She waited, heart hammering. But the voice that returned wasn't Sebastian's. I'm sorry, the receptionist said. Mr. Cole is in meetings all day. His assistant can reach out to schedule an appointment next month. Next month? Julia's voice cracked. No, you don't understand. I need to speak with him now. Please, just tell him. I'm sorry, Miss Myers. That's the best I can offer. The dial tone kicked in, sharp and indifferent, humming in her ear like a cruel joke. Julia stared at her phone. Anger rose, chasing away her fear. She had tried the polite way. Now it was time for something else. Research. That, at least, was her comfort zone. Within the hour, she uncovered that Sebastian was scheduled to speak at a private tech summit in downtown Boston the next day. Attendance was exclusive. But Julia had one possible in, Ethan Daniels, her childhood friend, now a staff writer at a local tech publication. You want me to sneak you into the summit? Ethan's voice held a mix of alarm and disbelief during their video call. This from the same Julia, who once needed 3 pep talks just to ask for vacation time? I wouldn't ask if it weren't important, she said firmly, locking eyes with the screen. Ethan studied her face. Does this have anything to do with why you've been off the grid lately? I'll tell you everything soon, I promise. But first, I need to do this. Ethan sighed, raking a hand through his messy brown hair. Meet me at the convention center entrance at noon. And Jules, whatever this is, I've got you. Tears pricked her eyes. I know, thank you. The next afternoon, Julia stood in the airy atrium of the Boston Convention Center, her press badge clipped to her dress, identifying her as Ethan's photography assistant. She'd chosen a simple black outfit and modest heels, professional enough to blend into the sea of corporate attendees. But her stomach rolled with nerves. Sebastian's keynote wasn't for another hour. From across the room, she spotted him deep in conversation with a circle of investors. He looked just as she remembered, confident, magnetic, entirely at ease in this polished world. The sight of him stirred a hurricane of emotions inside her. Longing, resentment, confusion. Deep breaths, Ethan whispered beside her, pretending to adjust his camera lens. You're going green. Morning sickness, she muttered without thinking. Ethan's camera nearly slipped from his hands. He caught it just in time. You're? What? She didn't answer. Not yet. Her eyes were locked on Sebastian, who had just started walking toward a private conference room, likely for pre-speech prep. Now or never. I'll explain everything, she told Ethan, already stepping into the crowd. Later. She slipped into the corridor just as Sebastian disappeared through a door marked speakers only. Her heart thudded in her chest, but she followed. The room beyond was quiet. Sebastian stood alone, reviewing notes on a sleek tablet. We need to talk. The words came out steadier than she expected. His head snapped up, recognition cut through his polished demeanor, quickly replaced by cautious curiosity. How did you get in here? That's your first question, Julia replied, stepping forward. Not how are you or why did I vanish without a word. Weeks of confusion and fear sharpened her tone. He set the tablet down slowly, his face unreadable. I apologize for leaving that morning. It wasn't professional of me. Professional? She let out a bitter laugh. That's what you call it? What happened between us? What would you call it? He asked, his voice maddeningly composed, but there was something flickering in his eyes. We had a connection, yes, he continued, but we both knew it couldn't go anywhere. Our lives are too different. Her hand moved to her stomach before she could stop it. Well, they're about to get a lot more connected than you think. The color drained from Sebastian's face. His hand gripped the back of a nearby chair. You're pregnant? The word hung in the room like a thunderclap. Congratulations, Mr. Cole. Your worlds about to collide. He sank into the chair, rubbing a hand over his face. When he looked up, his whole expression had changed. No longer guarded, just raw, exposed. Are you sure? He asked quietly. 3 tests? 1 appointment, I'm sure. Julia reached into her purse and pulled out a folded photo, sliding it across the table. 10 weeks. He picked up the ultrasound with trembling fingers, his eyes scanning the image. I never thought, he started, voice trailing off. Never thought what? She pressed. That actions have consequences. That your perfectly managed life might get messy? She hesitated, eyes fixed on the floor, before speaking again. That I might have to choose between doing the right thing and surviving. Her voice cracked, raw and honest. I thought about not telling you, about raising this baby alone, about giving up entirely. She looked up, meeting his eyes. Do you know what it's like to sit in a dark bathroom at 3 a.m., with your hand over your stomach, wondering if you're strong enough to become someone's whole world? Her words were quiet, but they landed like thunder. Because I do. That I'd be faced with a decision I was never prepared to make, Julia added, her voice quiet, almost fragile now. She took a breath, steadying herself. You weren't the only one who panicked. She looked at him, the walls around her cracking. For days I thought I might have to do this alone. I sat in my bathroom and seriously considered not keeping it. Not because I didn't want this baby, God I did, but because I was terrified. I have no savings, no partner, no safety net. Just a low-salary job and a city that doesn't wait for anyone. Sebastian said nothing, but the emotion in his face shifted. Guilt, sorrow, something deeper. That I could become my father, he said suddenly. The confession slipped out unfiltered. He looked at her, and for the first time she saw real fear in his eyes. The edge of her anger softened. What do you mean? Sebastian stood abruptly and began pacing. My father was a businessman too. Brilliant, respected, completely absent. Every promise he made to my mom, to me, he broke in the name of chasing the next big success. He stopped, facing her squarely. I swore I'd never do that to a child. So your answer was to disappear? She snapped. To hide behind meetings and a receptionist? I panicked, he said, barely above a whisper. That night with you it was real. Too real. I started to want things I never let myself want. So I ran. Julia's throat tightened, a wave of emotion rising in her chest. And now? Sebastian laughed softly, without humor. Now I'm standing in a conference room, Sebastian said quietly, with a woman who deserved better than what I gave her, staring at an ultrasound I never expected. And I'm more terrified than I've ever been. Join the club, Julia whispered. Their eyes locked, and something subtle shifted. A shared fear. A mutual vulnerability neither had admitted until now. Sebastian took a hesitant step toward her, but stopped when his phone buzzed loudly in his pocket. The keynote, he muttered, glancing at the screen. I'm supposed to be on stage in 10 minutes. Then go, Julia said suddenly, the fatigue in her voice unmistakable. Give your speech. Be the visionary everyone expects, but this conversation, this isn't finished. No, he said, his voice gentler now. It's just beginning. He pulled out a business card and scribbled something on the back. This is my private line. Call me tonight, please. We have a lot to figure out. She took the card. Their fingers touched again, just for a moment, and it sparked the same quiet current she remembered from that night. Tonight, she said softly. As she turned to leave, his voice caught her mid-step. Julia, I'm sorry, not for that night, but for every moment since. She gave a small nod, unable to speak, and slipped out the door. In the hallway, she leaned back against the cool wall, one hand over her belly, the other clenched around his business card like it might anchor her. There you are, Ethan said, jogging around the corner. his brow furrowed in worry. "Are you okay? Did you? Julia, you're crying." She touched her cheek, surprised to feel wetness there. "I'm okay," she said, and for the first time in weeks, she almost believed it. "But I think I owe you that explanation." Now, Sebastian's private penthouse overlooked the Boston skyline, glittering beneath the night sky. But Julia barely noticed the view. 2 weeks had passed since the confrontation at the convention center, and every day since had brought new questions, new tension, and layers of uncertainty to whatever it was they were building. The board meeting ran long, Sebastian said, stepping inside and loosening his tie. Even late at night, he carried that same restless energy. "Another acquisition on the table," he added. Timing couldn't be worse. Julia looked up from the plush couch where she'd been waiting. Her hand rested protectively over her stomach, the bump now unmistakable. "Your assistant mentioned something about Tokyo," she said. 3 weeks. Starting Monday? Sebastian poured a glass of water, his movements deliberate and tight. "The Japan deal is critical for our global push," he said. Then he met her eyes. The silence between them hung heavy with unspoken worry. "But you'll miss the next ultrasound," Julia finished quietly. The appointment card in her purse felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Sebastian set his glass down and crossed the room, taking a seat beside her. "I can try to delay the trip." "No," Julia said, shaking her head. "You can't put your entire company on hold because of me, because of us." That word, us, still felt foreign, loaded with questions they hadn't answered. His fingers found hers, and their hands linked easily, like it had always been that way. These moments had become more common in the past 2 weeks. Moments where the distance between their lives blurred just enough to imagine something real. "I've been thinking," he began, then paused as his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen and frowned before turning it face down. "About making changes," he said. "Restructuring leadership in the company." Julia's breath caught. She knew what a shift like that meant for him. "Sebastian, don't." A sharp knock cut her off. Rebecca Lynn, Sebastian's head of PR, pushed the door open without waiting. Her normally flawless appearance was visibly frayed. "We have a situation," Rebecca said, then stopped abruptly when she saw Julia. Her professional smile flickered, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I didn't realize you had company. What's wrong?" Sebastian sat straighter, his entire posture shifting into executive mode. Rebecca held up her tablet, the screen glowing with a finance article. "Lawrence Ashcroft has been buying shares, quietly, through shell corporations. He's setting up a hostile takeover." Julia watched the tension flood Sebastian's expression. She recognized the name. It had come up before, a former mentor, now rival. A man who built his reputation dismantling companies and selling off the pieces. "How long do we have?" Sebastian asked, already reaching for his phone. "Days," Rebecca said. "Maybe less, depending on when this hits major outlets." Her gaze flicked to Julia. "We'll need to handle this delicately, privately." The message was unmistakable. Julia stood, reaching for her coat, but Sebastian caught her wrist gently. "Stay," he said quietly, then turned to Rebecca. "Anything you need to say can be said in front of Julia." Rebecca's eyebrows lifted in surprise. "With all due respect, this requires total discretion, even the smallest leak." "Julia is carrying my child." The words fell into the room with crushing weight. Rebecca's tablet slipped from her hand and clattered onto the table. What? "I was going to tell you next week," Sebastian continued, calm on the surface, though his hand tightened around Julia's. "Once we'd figured out how to handle the announcement." "Announcement?" Rebecca repeated, dazed. Rebecca looked like she might faint. "You can't be serious. Not with Ashcroft circling. This kind of personal news." "This isn't a scandal," Sebastian interrupted, his voice suddenly razor-sharp. "This is my life, my family." The word family stirred something warm in Julia's chest, briefly, until Rebecca's next words cooled it. "Your life affects thousands of employees, millions in shareholder equity. Ashcroft will spin this as a distraction. He'll say you're losing control, and the board's already uneasy, the canceled meetings, your reduced hours." "I'm not ashamed of this," Sebastian said, standing. He pulled Julia gently to her feet beside him. "Of us." Rebecca closed her eyes, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Then let me help you manage this. We need to get ahead of it. A press release or perhaps a quiet settlement." "Settlement?" Julia pulled her hand away, her stomach twisted. "That's what you think this is? A liability to clean up? Miss Myers? Rebecca said carefully, her voice even and diplomatic. Surely you understand the complexity of the situation. Mr. Cole's role comes with certain public expectations. The only thing I understand, Julia said coldly, is that I'm done with this conversation. She grabbed her bag and headed for the door, the penthouse suddenly stifling. Ornate, claustrophobic. Julia, wait. Sebastian stepped forward, but Rebecca blocked his path. The board meets in 20 minutes, she said. If we don't have a plan in place before Ashcroft acts. Julia didn't wait for the rest. The elevator doors couldn't close fast enough. Outside, the night air slammed into her like a cold truth. She'd let herself believe she could belong in that world. She'd been wrong. She walked aimlessly, letting instinct carry her through familiar streets until she found herself on Ethan's porch. He took one look at her tear-streaked face and opened his arms. "Come in," he said softly. "I just made hot chocolate." Wrapped in the handmade quilt his grandmother had given him, Julia sank into Ethan's worn couch. And then, finally, she let herself break. She told him everything: the pressure, the silence, the feeling of being handled rather than heard. The ache of wondering if she was just a disruption to Sebastian's perfect life. "You're not a complication," Ethan said firmly. "You're a whole person, Julia, with your own story. Don't let anyone make you forget that." Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Sebastian. They'd been coming non-stop for the past hour, each one more urgent than the last. She turned the phone face down on the table, just like he had done. "What if I can't do this?" she whispered. "What if I'm not strong enough for his world?" Ethan looked at her gently. "The real question is his world strong enough for you?" The next morning, Julia called in sick, for the first time in her entire career. She spent hours in her apartment, ignoring the growing list of unread messages and missed calls, trying to imagine every version of the future. By mid-afternoon, the silence became too much. The walls felt like they were closing in. She ended up at the archive. The building was dark, except for the soft overhead lights in her private office. The scent of paper, old bindings, and worn pages grounded her. Here, surrounded by the stories of others, of choices made and paths followed, Julia could finally think. A soft knock startled her. Sebastian stood in the doorway, his typically perfect suit slightly rumpled, fatigue written on his face. "Ethan told me where you might be," he said gently, "not before making it very clear what he'd do to me if I hurt you again." "You shouldn't be here," Julia replied, not turning from her desk. "Don't you have a company to rescue?" "I spent the whole night in emergency board meetings," he said, stepping inside and closing the door, fending off Ashcroft's initial play, reassuring investors, redrafting plans. He paused, and all I could think about was you. His voice cracked just enough to betray everything he was feeling. How hollow all of this feels without someone to share it with, without someone real. Julia's fingers trembled as she sorted through documents she didn't need to look at. "Your PR team probably disagrees. I fired Rebecca." That made her look up. "The moment you walked out," he said, running a hand through his tousled hair. "She wasn't wrong about the risk, but she was wrong about what matters. I've spent my entire life dodging anything I couldn't quantify or control," he continued. "Then you walked into that conference room and tore all of that down." "Sebastian," she began, but he cut in. "I'm scared," he admitted, stepping closer. "Scared of becoming my father, of failing this child, of failing you. But I'm more afraid of hiding from something real just because it's messy and hard and unpredictable." Tears blurred Julia's vision. "I don't belong in your world." "Then maybe we build a new one," he said. "Together, if you'll let me." He reached for her hand. Before she could answer, his phone rang, the distinct tone he'd set for urgent board alerts. They both looked at it, reality intruding again. "Go?" Julia said softly. "Your company needs you." "What about what I need?" he asked, his thumb tracing slow circles over her palm. The question lingered in the space between them, full of risk, hope, and something that might be love. Outside, rain traced patterns down the tall library windows. Inside, two people stood at the edge of something uncertain, asking themselves if love was worth more than security. Her private life had become public spectacle. "Don't read that," Ethan said gently, reaching across the kitchen table to take her tablet. "They're just trying to sell headlines." "Too late," Julia replied. pushing away her untouched toast. At 16 weeks, her pregnancy had become too visible to hide behind sweaters and scarves. Her mother had called that morning. She'd seen the headlines. "How'd that go?" Ethan asked softly. "Exactly how you'd imagine." Julia closed her eyes, hearing Marion Myers' that trembling voice again. Disappointment laced with fear. "She thinks I've destroyed my future, that I'm just another story, another woman caught in the orbit of a powerful man who'll walk away and leave me behind with a baby and regrets." "And what do you think?" Ethan's voice was calm but direct. She didn't answer right away. Her fingers curled around the edge of the table as if steadying herself. "I think I'm scared she might be right." Her voice dropped. "I wake up every morning wondering if I've made a mistake I can't undo. Not just about Sebastian, but about everything. This city, this job, this version of myself that always felt temporary. Now I'm anchored, and I don't know if the ground beneath me can hold." Before she could answer more, her phone buzzed. Sebastian's private number. Again. She let it ring out, just like the last 3 days. Since that moment in the archive, everything had spiraled. Lawrence Ashcroft had gone public with his takeover. Coltech's stock had plunged, and somehow, the media had learned about her and Sebastian. Now every screen screamed speculation. "I think." Julia stood, moving to the window. "I think I was foolish to believe we could ever fit into each other's lives." The phone vibrated again, a message this time. "Please let me explain. Things aren't what they seem." A knock at the door startled them both. Ethan peered through the peephole. He let out a low whistle. "It's your mom." Julia's stomach dropped. "I can't handle this right now." Too late. The door burst open. Marion Myers stormed in, waving a newspaper like a sword. Her voice cut through the air. "Would you care to explain this?" she demanded. "Or should I just assume everything I'm reading about you and this businessman is true?" "Mom, please." Julia instinctively wrapped her arms around her middle, shielding the baby from the storm. "Mrs. Myers," Ethan interjected, always the calm in chaos. "Maybe we should sit down." "Don't you dare, Ethan Daniels. I trusted you to look after her." Marion's eyes locked on Julia's rounded stomach. "How far along?" 16 weeks, Julia said, barely above a whisper. 16. Marion sank into the armchair, the newspaper crumpling in her hand. "And when exactly were you going to tell me? When the child turns 18? "I was trying to figure things out," Julia said quietly. Her voice quivered. "I didn't even know how to tell myself, let alone you. Every time I thought about saying it out loud, the words turned to ash in my mouth." "Figure what out?" her mother snapped. "How to throw away your future? How to become gossip column material for a man who's likely halfway into his next scandal?" She pulled out her phone, swiping through articles. "Did you know he's been seen in Tokyo with his ex-fiancée?" Julia froze. "What?" "Caroline Pierce," Marion read aloud, turning the phone to show a grainy image of Sebastian walking into a restaurant with a stunning blonde. "They've been reconnecting during his trip, apparently." "That's not," Julia's voice cracked. She hadn't spoken to Sebastian since the confrontation in the archive, had ignored every call, every text. Now she wasn't sure if it was self-preservation or cowardice. Had her silence pushed him away? Her phone buzzed again. "Don't believe everything you read. Caroline is Ashcroft's cousin. I'm negotiating with her. For the company. For us." Even now, Julia's mother saw it differently. "You're still defending him?" Marion asked, standing and taking her daughter's hands. "Sweetheart, it's not too late to walk away from this. We can handle this quietly," Marion said. "Get you a fresh start, somewhere away from all this." "Handle it?" Julia pulled her hands away, hurt rising into full-blown anger. "This is my child, Mom, not some mistake to sweep under the rug. I'm trying to protect you." "No, you're trying to control me," Julia snapped, "just like you always have." The words spilled out, unfiltered, years of resentment boiling over. "You've never trusted me to make my own choices, or my own mistakes. Maybe that's why I kept this from you for so long." Marion recoiled, stunned. "I gave up everything to give you stability, after your father left, to protect you from men like Sebastian Cole. He's nothing like Dad." Even as she said it, doubt crept in. The business trips, the unanswered texts, the photos with Caroline. Julia's phone buzzed again. But it wasn't from Sebastian, it was from his company's main line. "Curious," she answered. "Ms. Myers?" A voice she recognized, his new assistant. "I'm so sorry to disturb you. But there's been an emergency. Mr. Cole's private jet was forced to land unexpectedly in Tokyo. He's been admitted to a hospital. The room tilted. Ethan caught her by the arm, helping her to a chair. "What happened?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "He's stable, but the doctors had to take him into surgery. Before they did, he was asking for you." Over and over. Surgery. The word echoed in her head, louder than anything. Her hand instinctively went to her belly. She felt a flutter. Their baby. A reminder of everything at stake. "I'll be on the next flight," she said. "Julia, no," Marian interrupted. "Think about what you're doing." "I am thinking," Julia said, her voice suddenly clear and calm. "Thinking about how I've been letting fear run my life. Hiding. Questioning." She stood slowly. "Meanwhile, the father of my child has been risking everything. For his company, for us. And now he's lying in a hospital bed and on the other side of the world, asking for me. It could be a setup," her mother warned. "Another manipulation." "Or it could be love," Julia said, surprising even herself with the steadiness in her voice. "Real, messy, complicated love, the kind worth showing up for." "I'll drive you," Ethan said quietly. "And don't worry about work. I'll cover for you." "I'll talk to the director," Julia said, grabbing clothes from drawers and tossing them into her suitcase. Marian watched, stunned. "You're really going to risk everything? For him?" "No, Mom." Julia paused, looking her mother straight in the eye. "I'm risking everything for me, for the life I want, the person I want to be." Her hand drifted to her stomach, "For the family we could become." Her phone buzzed again. One last message. "He loves you, you know. Won't shut up about you even with a concussion. Get your ass to Tokyo and fix this. Caroline Pierce." Despite everything, Julia couldn't stop the smile tugging at her lips. She looked around her apartment. At the chaos, the headlines, her mother's anxiety, Ethan's steady support, and for the first time in weeks, she felt clarity. "Book 2 tickets," she told Ethan. Marian blinked. "What?" "You're coming with me." "Julia, because maybe you're right," Julia interrupted. "Maybe I am making a mistake, but if I am, I want my mother there with me, and if I'm not—" She reached out, guiding her mother's hand to her stomach, right as the baby kicked. "Then I want you to meet the man who's nothing like Dad, and help us figure out how to be a family." Marian's eyes filled with tears. She kept her hand there, resting on the tiny life growing inside her. "You're so stubborn," she whispered. "Just like me," Julia said, smiling. "Just like us," Marian corrected, pulling her daughter into a hug. "Now help me pack," Julia said. "Your grandchild and I have a plane to catch." They moved quickly. Julia's mind spun with uncertainty. What had really happened in Tokyo? What Sebastian's accident meant? Whether Ashcroft had played a part? But one thing was clear. She was done letting fear dictate her chapters. She was writing her own story now. The corridor stretched endlessly. After 20 hours of travel, Julia and Marian had made it to Tokyo General. The sterile white walls glared under fluorescent lights, cold and clinical, completely opposite the storm in Julia's chest. "He's just up ahead," said Caroline Pierce, heels tapping against the polished tile. In person, Sebastian's rumored ex-fiancée carried herself with brisk efficiency. Less scandal, more hurricane in heels. "Fair warning," Caroline said over her shoulder. "He's being completely impossible. The doctors want him resting. He's been taking board calls since he woke up." Marian gave Julia's hand a gentle squeeze. The flight had given them time, real time, to talk. About wounds, about fears, and about starting again. "Do you want me to wait here?" Marian asked quietly. Julia shook her head. "No, we're all family now, one way or another. We face this together." The hospital room door opened before they could knock. Standing in the doorway was a man who exuded both wealth and wariness. Lawrence Ashcroft himself. For once, he looked less like a business predator and more like a concerned relative. "Ms. Myers," he greeted with a tired smile. "I was hoping you'd come." He gestured to the room behind him. "Maybe you can talk some sense into him. He's all yours." Julia stepped forward cautiously, Marian and Caroline following close behind. Inside, Sebastian lay propped up against white pillows, his usual aura of control dimmed by the realities of injury. Bandages wrapped his temple. One arm was in a cast. His laptop sat open on his lap. Multiple phones buzzed silently around him like relics of a world that wouldn't slow down. When his eyes lifted, they found Julia's immediately. "Julia," he said, her name thick with emotion. Then he looked beyond her. "Mrs. Myers, I wasn't expecting." "Clearly," Marian said dryly. There's a lot none of us expected. But her tone carried curiosity rather than censure. Caroline cleared her throat. We'll give you some privacy. She nodded at Ashcroft, who followed her out, closing the door behind them. Silence settled. Just the soft beeping of monitors broke the stillness. Julia moved closer. The bruises, the lines of fatigue, the vulnerability in his gaze. You're really here, Sebastian whispered, reaching for her with his good hand. She took it. That familiar spark still lived in his touch. What happened? Officially, he said, his voice low. Mechanical failure on landing. His thumb moved slowly against her palm. Unofficially, someone might have tampered with the jet. The investigation's ongoing. Marian gasped softly. Someone tried to kill you? Welcome to the world of hostile takeovers, Sebastian said grimly. Though I think this went well beyond business. He looked at Julia, eyes heavy with meaning. Ashcroft came to me after the crash. Apparently, Sebastian said, his interest in the company wasn't just business. Caroline found proof of industrial espionage inside Coltech. Someone's been leaking our research, using the chaos of the takeover as cover. Julia frowned. So the crash wasn't random. Sebastian's jaw tightened. It was either a warning or a silencing attempt. Marian's voice cut through the tension. My late husband, Julia's father, was a corporate attorney. I remember how brutal these power plays can get. Sebastian looked at her, understanding dawning. That's why you were so concerned about your daughter being with someone like me. Lam? Julia started, but Marian raised a hand. Yes, she said simply. I watched my marriage crumble under the weight of ambition and secrets. I didn't want that for Julia. She met Sebastian's eyes directly. But maybe I judged too quickly. History doesn't have to repeat itself. I'm not going anywhere, Sebastian said, his voice strong. Not this time. He turned to Julia. I'm sorry for going silent these past weeks. Once we identified the security breach, I had to keep things quiet. Caroline and Ashcroft helped me orchestrate a sting to catch the insiders. Which worked, Julia said, until someone tried to take down your plane. A desperate move by desperate people, he said, but it had one unexpected upside. His smile softened. It brought you to me. The company can wait, he said, finishing her sentence. I've spent my whole life putting work first, thinking success would fix the emptiness. He reached for her hand. Then I met you, and suddenly, none of it mattered. Not like this. Tears pricked at Julia's eyes. I was afraid, she whispered, of disappearing into your world, of not being enough. You're more than enough, he said, placing his hand gently on her stomach. Their baby kicked in response. You're everything I didn't know I was missing. Then he turned to Marian. I know I haven't earned your trust yet, but I love your daughter, and I want to build a life that respects both our worlds. A world where success means nothing unless there's family to share it with. Marian blinked back tears. Well, she said finally, you've clearly got a knack for dramatic declarations. He's had practice, Caroline said dryly, poking her head back in. Been rehearsing that monologue since he woke up. But now the doctors are demanding rest, and the police want statements from everyone about the crash. Go, Sebastian told them gently. I'll be here when you're done. We have time now, all of us. As Julia turned to go, he caught her hand one last time. I almost forgot. Check the drawer, he said, nodding toward the bedside table. Inside, she found a small box. Nestled in velvet was a delicate gold chain holding a single, simple key. What's this? She asked, voice low. The key to our future, he said softly. I bought a house last month. He hesitated, watching her reaction. Nothing extravagant. A Victorian near the archive. There's a garden for the baby. A home office so I can be around, for dinners, for bedtime, for everything that counts. Julia's heart swelled. You're really doing this? Changing everything? I already did, he said with a smile. The paperwork went through yesterday. I'm stepping down as CEO, staying on in an advisory role. The company will survive, especially now that we've rooted out the breach. He reached for her hand again. But our family, that's what I want to thrive. Marian touched the key in Julia's palm. A Victorian, you say, with a garden? And a mother-in-law suite, Sebastian added quickly. If you're open to being nearby. Tears spilled freely down Marian's cheeks. You're good, she whispered. You're very good. He is, Caroline added, appearing in the doorway. When he's not being an idiot who disappears after life-altering one-night stands. They all laughed, full, genuine laughter that cleared the last of the old fear and pain. Outside, the Tokyo skyline glittered like stars. Inside, a family began again. 3 months later, Julia sat in her garden, watching Sebastian read to their newborn daughter. Marion knelt nearby, planting roses she swore would bloom by the baby's first steps. The scandal had faded. Headlines had shifted to innovation, to new leadership, to second chances. The baby reached for the book with tiny fingers. Sebastian kissed her head and looked up at Julia with eyes full of love. "Another story?" he asked. Julia touched the key that still hung around her neck. "Yes," she said. "Ours." Imagine yourself in Julia's shoes. Would you walk away from a quiet, predictable life for a love filled with uncertainty but meaning? Could you balance the pull of family expectations with the desire to follow your own path? So the story has finally come to a close. And you, our incredible, thoughtful friend, you're still here, aren't you? If you're truly with me this far, then something in this story must have touched your heart in a way only real experiences can. So let's take a moment, just you and me, and look at it not through a lens of right or wrong, but simply from a place of honesty. At its core, this story isn't just about love, scandal, or business empires. It's about courage. The kind of courage it takes to step into the unknown, to admit fear and still move forward. Julia's journey reminds us that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is to choose ourselves, to say yes to life even when it's messy, to trust in a future that hasn't yet unfolded. It echoes the Stoic wisdom of Epictetus, who said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it, that matters." Julia didn't choose to fall for someone powerful. She didn't choose uncertainty or public scrutiny, but she did choose how she responded, with dignity, with vulnerability, with strength. That's the healing, isn't it? To face your own chaos and say, "I'm still here, and I'm still choosing love." So maybe this story isn't just fiction, it's a reminder that even in our most uncertain moments, there's power in staying open, power in being brave enough to write your own ending. If this resonated with you, even in the smallest way, I invite you, please like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that matter. Because maybe, just maybe, the next story will be yours. Thank you for being here. Truly.